So good evening, starting from east to west, to those of you in the US on the East Coast, and good afternoon to the folks moving out in our direction, and good morning to everyone in Southeast Asia. It's my distinct pleasure to be here today as the director for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. I'm Miriam Stark, and I'm here actually to introduce our moderator for today's session, Dr. Ehito Kimura. And he will walk us through Relearning Southeast Asia Field School. Thank you and enjoy.
All right, thank you, Miriam. Selamat siang, selamat malam, selamat pagi, sawadee, and aloha from Hawaii. Welcome to our spring 2024 webinar series that's sponsored by the University of Hawaii, the Center for Southeast Asian Studies here, and also our partners at Michigan State University and their Mekong Culture Well program. So today's panel, Relearning Southeast Asia, is the first of a four-part webinar series that's on decolonizing Southeast Asian studies. So the next three are going to be, today's going to be Relearning Southeast Asia. The next one will be Reteaching Southeast Asia, then we'll have one on Researching Southeast Asia, and then finally on Rewriting Southeast Asia. So my name is Ehito Kimura, and I'm a faculty member here in the Department of Political Science at the University of Hawaii, and I'm also a member of the Executive Council for the Center of Southeast Asian Studies here. Before I introduce our graduate student panelists today, I want to give a little bit of a background on the origins and the genealogy of this particular panel on Relearning Southeast Asia. So this past summer, faculty members and scholars at the University of Hawaii and the East-West Center helped to organize a field school for graduate students working on Southeast Asia, based on a generous grant from the Luce Foundation and part of our LuceSEA grant here. So this particular field school was really distinctive from its earliest origins. It was really collaborative from the earliest stages. We worked with two partner institutions in the region, the Universitas Hasanuddin Forest and Society Research Group, based in South Sulawesi in Indonesia, and our friends at Khon Kaen University at the Faculty of Agriculture in Thailand. So the students from here and the faculty as well, they came from Hawaii. They split up into two teams and headed to the two different countries, Indonesia and Thailand. And there, they worked with the host organizations, with the graduate students there and some of their faculty, and split up again in Indonesia. One group went to Rompo Gading and another went to Batu Noni. And the Thai team, they went to two villages, Ban Sawang and Ban Mor. And we've had actually a previous webinar on this that should be available on YouTube. So if you're interested to learn more about this particular field school, that's certainly available. But during the final meeting and debriefing of this field school, a lot of the graduate students and other participants were talking about what kinds of outcomes we can really think about. I think Sara in particular, but others as well, really reflected on how the field school in particular allowed for seeing Southeast Asia through a different kind of lens. And being from Southeast Asia, but also thinking through the different experiences of being in a different country in the region, having gone to graduate school, and all those kinds of things. And so we thought that it might be a really interesting experience to kind of reflect on kind of thinking about learning about Southeast Asia through this kind of new lens. And so the idea today, I think it's noted in the description, is that we're going to have our panelists today reflect on how the field school experience really enabled them to have a newfound appreciation of the region, both as insiders, but also outsiders, how that facilitates a relearning of historical and contemporary connections that transcends boundaries and has reshaped their own particular research plans. So I hope it's a fruitful exchange and a real real opportunity to think critically and reflexively about understanding and sort of relearning Southeast Asian studies, not just for the panelists, but for all of us that are here. So on that note, let me just briefly introduce our graduate student panelists. First is Dalilah Nabila, who is a PhD candidate in geography. Dalilah, you want to just wave your hand? He is a PhD candidate here in the geography department at the University of Hawaii, and she is logging in from the Indonesian city of Palu in central Sulawesi. And her research is focusing on understanding how disaster-affected communities memorialize and cope with the tragic effects of the triple hazards, earthquake, tsunami, and liquefaction that hit Palu in September of 2018. Then Sara Loh, Sara Loh is a PhD candidate in environmental anthropology. Sarah, yeah. Here at the University of Hawaii. She's currently conducting dissertation fieldwork with the Temuan Orang Asli, a subgroup of the original peoples of peninsular Malaysia, and how they're adapting to development and climate-related floods amidst long-term struggles for self-determination and land rights. And then we have Ariel Mota Alves, who's a PhD candidate in political science. Here at Manoa. He's born and raised in Dili in Timor-Leste, and he's currently conducting research on the nexus of climate change, carbon markets, and land access in Timor-Leste. And so all of our students are right now in Southeast Asia. Our panelists today are in Southeast Asia. We're praying that there are no issues around connections and electricity and those kinds of things. But by way of format, what I think we're going to do, because we have a little bit of a delay in terms of internet speed and things like that, is I'll ask one question at a time and then ask our students, our panelists today, to kind of reflect on that question, and then we'll move on to the next question. And I won't do so much sort of bantering or anything like that. And then once we finish, we have about 4 questions, and then we'll open it up to all of our attendees today and allow them to ask questions as well. So I want to start by asking you all to reflect a little bit about your own background, you know, how you thought about, learned about Southeast Asia, you know, kind of before becoming a graduate student, before becoming a scholar of the region. And do you have any kind of experiences or anecdotes that you wanna share about that? And I think Dal, we said we would start with you, and then we'll go to Sara and then Ariel.
Thanks, Ehito. Selamat pagi, good morning from Sulawesi. My name is Dalilah. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Geography and Environment, University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm originally from Brunei Darussalam, so a small nation on the island of Borneo, located just north of the equator, and now I'm currently based in Palu, which is located 3 hours south of the equator. So it's been fun moving from the north to the south of the equator because we pretty much experience the same temperature here. It's just hot. So I'm in Palu for my dissertation fieldwork. So talking a little bit about my background. So before coming to Hawaii, I did both of my bachelor's and master's degree in Brunei. So in schools, all I can remember is like, we learned about this region that we call Southeast Asia, but only to the extent of like its geography, right? So basic information about its geography, and then major historical events and the culture and the people, but only, I would say, at a superficial level. And then if anything, I think back in Brunei, in schools, we were taught more about the history of Brunei, Japanese occupation of the 1940s, and British colonization. And ASEAN, don't forget that. It's always about ASEAN in schools. And during my undergrad, because I did geography all the way from bachelor's and master's, and during my undergrad, I remember taking World Regional Geography class. And that's where I think I found more in-depth understanding of the people and places in Southeast Asia, and we engaged more with academic articles that discuss the regional issues experienced by the different countries. But basically, I would say I only know of Southeast Asia through these different representations, how Southeast Asia are being represented to me through images, through text, through videos, through sounds. So because of that, when I was thinking about this question, so what do I think of Southeast Asia before coming to graduate school? I would say that I think of Southeast Asia as this imaginary entity or like this imagined region. I can't really grasp it because there's a lot, Southeast Asia, there's 10 countries in there, diverse cultures, diverse places, diverse people. And so Southeast Asia is just this imaginary region to me, which is separated by artificial boundaries. And we have this significant water bodies that further, divide us from the mainland Southeast Asia and to the, archipelago Southeast Asia. But I think that despite the differences that we have, we do find similarities, let's say in our love for chili, right? In our love for rice, and somewhat like united under this economically connected, like through this entity called ASEAN. And of course, like 2 weeks to 30 days visa-free passport when we travel to ASEAN other countries. So that's the privilege that we have, right? Coming from this region. And I think that it's only when I get to visit other countries, like as Bruneians, we tend to frequent Malaysia, that we see, oh, there's people here, there's other people other than Brunei, like there's people in Malaysia, there's people in Indonesia, but that's the extent of it. It doesn't really enrich my understanding of Southeast Asia in general, but it does, give me more understanding about Malaysia and its people and culture. Yeah, that's all from me.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Dal. Thanks, Ehito. Hi, yeah, I'm Sarah. So I was born and grew up in Peninsular Malaysia, in particular Penang. Currently, I'm in Penang for Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. But I've been in the outskirts of like Kuala Lumpur and Selangor, carrying out fieldwork with, as Dr. Ehito mentioned, like Orang Asli on how they're adapting to floods amidst like other struggles for self-determination and then rights. And so I had the opportunity to pursue my bachelor's, master's, and PhD abroad, so in both the UK and the US. But I think where I started to learn about Southeast Asia was probably in school. Although I don't know if I did learn about Southeast Asia per se. I think I recall we learned more about like, yeah, as Dal mentioned, like our country's history, Japanese occupation, like British colonization, and definitely a lot about Islamic civilization in Malaysia, more so than Southeast Asia's history or Southeast Asia today. But I also think that's just a reflection of kind of Malaysia's own chosen history or story. And so a lot of what I know about other Southeast Asian countries is from, as Dal said, like other forms of knowing. So for me, it was a lot of like pop culture, traditional and social media, and a lot of it's kind of about our direct neighbors. So Malaysia's direct neighbors are like Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia. Unfortunately, I actually didn't learn a lot about Brunei until I met Dal, or Timor-Leste until I met Ariel. And so yeah, I grew up exposed to like Indonesian and Thai like songs, shared musical traditions such as like gamelan, wayang kulit, and like random interactions between our countries, such as like the like forever rivalry between like Malaysia and Singapore on like whose food is better, or like Malaysia and Indonesia on like who owns our national anthem, like Negaraku. Debates over like transboundary haze, Thailand's like endless coups. And also a lot of like disasters such as like this Aceh tsunami, like Palu earthquake, like yearly typhoons. And I think coming from Penang, definitely like a really big one is like food, which is because we're right by the border of like Thailand, so we eat a lot of Thai food. Like I had a lot of Thai classmates, like Songkran was a big thing, and people often drive up to like Hat Yai for like tourism, right? And so the other way I conceptualized Southeast Asia was as like a place that's rich in like culture and nature and biodiversity. And so it's a place for like tourism, also voluntourism. And so yeah, that's kind of like how I know about Southeast Asian countries. But in terms of Southeast Asia as a region, I think as a kid, like I used to attend these arts education programs. So we would go out together, like oral histories and document local cultures from your everyday like uncles and aunties in the city and translate them to like song, dance, art. And so many of these elders came from like China, India, and other parts of Southeast Asia, such as Thailand, Myanmar, Indonesia. And I think this was kind of the beginning of my conceptualization of Southeast Asia as a place of connectivity, of migration, and of flows. And I further encountered a lot of kind of these connections when I was working in like grassroots organizations and like think tanks, where I encountered diaspora and like migrant workers, right, who come to Malaysia from Indonesia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Philippines for work. And so there's struggles and stories, I think, really shaped my perception of Southeast Asia too. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Ariel, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Ariel. I'm currently in Dili, the capital city of Timor-Leste. I'm here for my fieldwork research. I'm studying the politics of carbon offsets and agroforestry and conservation. Let's see. So in terms of my previous exposure to Southeast Asia before graduate school, is very different because when I started, I started my formal education right after the independence. I think I was around first grade or in the second grade when Timor-Leste got independence in 2002. So a lot of our early education was focusing on cultivating the idea of a new nation into the young minds, right? Like building a nationalism by focusing on learning about our past from, you know, like from the Portuguese colonization, and then Indonesian occupation, and what does it mean for us as people to overcome this and then becoming a new nation. So I remember, you know, going to school, we had to learn how to sing our new national anthem, or in our art classes, we have to we learn how to draw our map with the correct administrative divisions and the names of the municipalities. So, you know, I growing up, the only like Sara said earlier, the only other country in Southeast Asia that keep coming up in our education is Indonesia for obvious reasons, but we don't think so much, at least for me, I don't think so much about Southeast Asia. Like that was not, I guess I might have heard of Singapore or Thailand, but I have no imagination about those places. And because a lot of our history, our education focusing so much on learning about our people and what does it mean to become a new nation. So absolutely zero knowledge of Southeast Asia, especially mainland Southeast Asia. That was, I know about those countries.
All right, thank you, all three of you. I heard a lot of really interesting things there, including, you know, this idea of, you know, imagination, right? Being kind of this imagined entity. And we, you know, we know and we learn that, of course, regions and even nations are sort of these imagined communities or these imagined constructs and things like that. But it's also really interesting to think through, you know, the lived experiences that, you know, really when we think of, you know, other countries in the region, the proximity also is really important in terms of being right next to Indonesia, or being right next to or nearby Malaysia and things like that. So those are the things, you know, that color people's views, that really influence people, cultural aspects as well, and all of that. So, you know, I think we then want to turn a little bit to think about this question of, like, how did you become interested in becoming a scholar of sort of Southeast Asia, or at least a country in Southeast Asia. And in terms of like going to graduate school, kind of learning this general area, how did that sort of shape your view? How did it transform your view of Southeast Asia from like your sort of earlier conceptions of the region? I think here we said we're going to have Ariel, and then Sara, and then Dal. So, Ariel.
For me, my first proper exposure to Southeast Asian studies was in graduate school when I took the class with Dr. Barbara and Daya. And the class is structured in a way that we learn in all the 10 countries structurally, including Timor-Leste too. And since then, my interest grew, because even in my undergraduate studies in Minnesota, a lot of my research term papers, when I write about Timor-Leste, I only write about like the policy or politics in Timor-Leste, but I don't focus so much about the region, or like writing it through the backdrop of the region, like from the colonialism through transitions, democratizations, and all of these political, economic, environmental transitions in Southeast Asia. But in Hawaii was really when my interest grew, when I realized that that was when I realized that I wanted to focus my education and intellectual journey in the region, instead of just focusing in one country. And then subsequently, I also took Southeast Asia now in Asian studies with Jojo Abinales, and then I took another Southeast Asian politics with Professor Kimura, and then also with Dr. Micah Fisher as well. So I would say that now a lot of my intellectual my intellectual journey currently is really shaped by a lot of scholars coming from Western countries who study Southeast Asia, and a lot of them are familiar to us. People like Benedict Anderson, which is a classic scholar of Southeast Asia, James Scott, Tanya Lee, Tonchai, and Nancy Peluso. They really shape how I understand, for example, in my own research, understand about the context of environmental changes, but looking it through the transitions in Southeast Asia. And I think like we talk, Sara and Kadal, when we talk about among ourselves, we talk about how it is funny and ironic that we learn about our places, our country, our region in Western institutions, and that speaks so much to how a lot of intellectual tradition of Southeast Asian studies are shaped by Western scholars, and not to say that that's not a good thing, because I really like a lot of these scholars myself. So but I think right now there are I hope to continue to join the conversation as not a Western scholar in the Southeast Asian study. I guess I'll leave it that, and I'll give to my colleagues to also speak more about this.
Thank you. Sara, thank you.
Yeah, I think coming from Malaysia and Southeast Asia, I've always wanted my work or my research to kind of contribute towards the growth of like my own home and my own communities. It's always just kind of made sense to me that way. And so I would say, I don't really know when I became interested in Southeast Asia, like as an area of scholarly study for that reason, because I've always, like even from the start, wanted or felt that way. But I think that I guess what I mentioned earlier, like my interest in like connectivity and like migration and like flows in Southeast Asia led to my research focus in like undergrad in like Southeast Asia, China relations in Southeast Asia and other Southeast Asian nation relations, and also kind of in ethnomusicology, where I looked at kind of the music and politics in Malaysia, but also musical and cultural traditions that like were found across many other countries in Southeast Asia. And so going back to Malaysia after that to work, I worked in like community development with local and indigenous communities, and a lot of them were kind of facing issues relating to like development and change, land rights and deforestation, etc., which eventually led to like my current interest in like environment, development, disasters, indigeneity, and more broadly kind of just like rural transformations and just change, right, in Southeast Asia. And so I look to a lot of research and work and case studies, and also field experiences from communities or researchers in our neighboring countries, as I would say many of these issues are similar or transboundary, such as like haze, disasters, etc. And so these kind of like familiar contexts, but also different. And so I was curious to learn more about how we can learn from each other, since there's so many similarities, as Dal was mentioning, and how can we kind of, to go back to like the connectivity theme, like draw on like flows of knowledge in the region. And so I guess fast forward coming to like grad school in UH, and to a certain extent my ME, I would say I learned to conceptualize in grad school about Southeast Asia as like a region of study, and a place that's like rich in opportunities for like grounded research and for comparative and like collaborative work. So I'm really glad I met like all of you. So in classes, I think, as Ariel mentioned, right, we're exposed to like classic like books and articles focused on like Southeast Asia's history, Southeast Asia today. I would say I learned to understand Southeast Asia, like its geography, politics, like communities, development, as it has been taught to Southeast Asian studies students, sorry. And I learned to theorize about Southeast Asia as a region, and to a certain extent, like we learned the genealogy of like Southeast Asian studies. But I'm also grateful to kind of have entered grad school at a time where like academia is being like critical of itself and trying to decolonize in like multiple ways, where we actively like read and seek out like works or non-traditional works also by local scholars in local languages. And we think through like the politics of like knowledge production, the troubling history of like our field. And I think we're also encouraged to reflect a lot on like our positionalities. And so I think that's something that definitely fed into like how I conceive of Southeast Asia now. And I just wanted to add, outside of classes, like as an international student going to UH, I think like it's almost synonymous with like being a part of like East West Center community. Shout out to East West Center. Somehow amidst like these like hundreds of students, you know, Southeast Asians like end up gravitating towards each other. Like we found each other to find community. And I think so one of the questions that I think Dal, you asked earlier, right, like what brings us together and beyond kind of these like arbitrary borders that place us into like a region, like what brings us together and what makes us like Southeast Asian together, what gives us like familiarity, and I'll kind of just end with that question.
Thank you, Sara. Dal.
So how I got interested in Southeast Asia as a region of study is, I think, if I could remember, like during my master's. So I had the opportunity, you know, to visit other countries like Myanmar and Indonesia for like training workshops, right, that focus on disaster risk management of cultural heritage sites in Southeast Asia. So, and I meet people, you know, archaeologists, social scientists, like other grad students who came from these various parts of Southeast Asia. So we bounced ideas off of one another, and we had, you know, I learned through conversations with them about the ways of life in countries in Southeast Asia. And I remember like coming from Brunei, we basically have no threat of natural hazards other than, we have a downpour or we have a strong wind, but that's the extent of it. So I remember one of the participants from Indonesia was presenting all the different types of natural hazards that have happened in Indonesia. And he said Indonesia is a lab for disaster. So if you want to do research, come to Indonesia. And I thought, okay, I was fascinated at, I was 22-year-old. I shouldn't be fascinated because at the expense of someone else's suffering. That's not good and insensitive of me. But it got me curious too. Like, how do people cope with this daily threat of hazards? Like one move of this Palu Coral Fault, Palu is gonna have another earthquake. And then I remember recently I attended this research seminar and this professor was saying, any minute now an earthquake is going to happen. And I feel like this surge of anxiety, what's going to happen? Where am I going to run if earthquake happened? Because I have no experience. So that got me here. So in 2018, in September, I was in Brunei at that time. So I saw on TV and read it on newspaper that an earthquake and consequent tsunami and liquefaction struck Palu. I think when we're talking about disasters in Indonesia, earthquake and tsunami seems to be synonymous to, this part of the region. But when it comes to liquefaction, I said, for a geographer to not know liquefaction, I said, that's not good. So I dig more, and I recall watching images of this, solid land turning into liquid and churning and dragging and cementing things that is above and below the surface. And then soon after, I learned that the Indonesian government decided to clear some of the area, but ultimately decided to leave most of this liquefied land as it is. So basically, we can say in a sense that liquefaction zone now has become a kind of cemetery because there's still bodies buried underneath and won't be found until forever, maybe. So those images, along with my interest in normalization and in the history and the cultures of the Malay archipelago, I think that's what inspired me to pursue my research in Indonesia and to learn more about Southeast Asia. And I think I was lucky enough to go to University of Hawaii, Manoa, because we have the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, where we have the resources, these resources that I would not be able to access if I were to continue my PhD in Brunei, because there's limited resources there that I'd like to engage with. And then coming to graduate school, like my friends, Ariel and Sara, so my view of Southeast Asia is further shaped by interactions, like taking classes with faculty members who have done meaningful research in specific countries in the region, right, on specific topics, and having fruitful discussion during our seminars, right? So that is in a formal setting. I think another way that have shaped my view of Southeast Asia during my graduate school is when I meet with other graduate students like Sara and Ariel, were East West Center students. We stay at Manoa, so we get to interact with other people. Like this is the first time that I met someone from Timor-Leste. And sometimes at East West Center, we don't just talk, about work. We talk about, oh, you're from this country. So we connect in ways that, through food. Like when I see someone in the kitchen, oh, I'm craving for pat krapao, but Hawaii is expensive, so I can't afford it. Why don't you teach me how to make one? So we connect that way. And then we learn more about, the places that they're from, the ways of life where they live, and then their personal lives, and finding common grounds, and then we connect that way. And we also meet other graduate students during conferences. And I think 2 years ago that University of Hawaii was hosting AAS, Association for Asian Studies. And it was good because we met other scholars, specifically from Indonesia, because we had dinner together, right? So it's nice to, let's say, for example, putting the name on the article, like Nancy Peluso, to a face, and how fluent she was in Bahasa Indonesia and that kind of stuff. So that graduate school definitely, and the resources and the connections that University of Hawaii Manoa and the department and the respective faculty members has definitely shaped my understanding of the region as a field of study.
Great, thank you. A lot of what I heard there was, the kind of personal narratives and, often some combination of chance and choice, right? And really sparking kind of curiosity and intellectual commitment. And then also kind of the, as a political scientist, sort of, I think of it in terms like the institutional ways in which knowledge gets constructed. And we think about Southeast Asia through the courses and the things we're reading and things like that, but also the informal networks, right? And the circuits, right? That we're all sort of a part of. So that was really fascinating. So then, I think the question then turns to really the field school experience in particular, and thinking through that that sort of collaborative project. You were with each other, you were also with partners and graduate students and scholars from the host institutions. So I was wondering, if you could talk a little bit about the personal experiences there and how that experience also sort of changed or transformed or made you reflect on the conceptions or ideas of Southeast Asia or the countries in particular, Thailand and Indonesia. So here I think we're going to go Sara, Ariel, Dal.
Thanks, Ehito. I think I joined field school with the intention to like pause and reflect on my own dissertation fieldwork because I was in Malaysia already at that time, to kind of be able to think from like a broader perspective, like more multidisciplinary and comparative. And so it was really interesting and a privilege that for my first visit to Indonesia as a student who's like actively trying to like think of Southeast Asia as like a place and think of all these theories that we've learned, that I got to go to South Sulawesi, a place that like we've read about, right, in the work of like Tanya Lee, Anna Singh, Micah Fisher, Alves. But I got to go there, right, with Dal. Like when else can we do that? So for context, I'm from Malaysia, and so I went to national school. So I do speak Bahasa Melayu. I can understand like some Bahasa Indonesia, but in Sulawesi Selatan, they speak like Bahasa Makassar and Bahasa Bugis for the most part. So like trained, right, in like Southeast Asian studies, like briefly, like before I go there, I'm thinking like, wow, like center periphery relations, like politics of language, like what is a nation? But at the same time, I'm also thinking like, oh yeah, just like be present and go there and like, get to know your new colleagues and collaborators and like learn. And so we get to Makassar, and I think if anyone has heard me or Krishna talk about my film school experience, you'll know this story. So in my initiation into like Malaysia, Sulawesi relations, and actually to Sulawesi, began with a discussion with like our local collaborators from Unhas on like this TV show from Malaysia called Upin Ipin. Don't laugh. For those who don't know, it's like this Malaysian like kids TV show, like animated kids show about like twins living in like rural Malaysia who are just going about their lives, like learning and experiencing like everyday things with some like moral lessons thrown in. So like thank God I had watched it like once or twice on local TV before, but it definitely helped break the ice. Every single time I met someone new, they would introduce me as like, oh, the girl from like the Upin Ipin country. But through this, I think importantly, I got to like learn, I think as soon as we arrived, like a lot about Sulawesi, right? Because I was South Sulawesi, because I was asking like, why do you like this show? why is it such a thing? And I think it's like Pakarno who said that, oh, it's like really relatable because like it's familiar to them, right? It showed me that like rural Malaysia and like rural South Sulawesi or Indonesia kind of share familiar like geographies, like culture, religion, everyday life experiences of change. And so that was really interesting to me. But it also kind of made me think a lot about kind of being both an insider and outsider, right? Because I understand Bahasa and I'm from Southeast Asia, but I'm still an outsider because like I'm from Malaysia, from this place where Upin Ipin is from. But kind of going to rural areas for like our kind of brief like immersion into field school, it was really interesting because locals, I didn't expect locals to like get excited to hear that I'm from Malaysia, because they would ask me like first about like Upin Ipin, and then they'd bring out like Malaysian snacks, and I was like, what? And they talk about like their journey to like Malaysia for work. Some of their families are still there. They pointed out like houses and like built from, and like farms that were open due to like remittances from Malaysia. And so kind of like I felt like it was a unique story that was being told to me because of like my positionality and like because I'm from Malaysia. And I also realized that some of them knew more aspects of Malaysia than I did based on their experiences working there, right? Because it's a very unique experience being a migrant to Malaysia. And also from Upin Ipin, I think they knew more about Malaysia. And so I think going like reflecting on that, like I definitely became more curious about like Bugis Malaysia migrations and relations and the implications of these for like environmental and social change in like both of these places. And coming home, I definitely began to also be more aware or like ask more about like local Malaysian perspectives of these. And so yeah, in that sense, like my perceptions of like both Malaysia and Indonesia have changed because of that really random Upin Ipin TV show. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Next we have Ariel.
Okay. Let's see. So when I think of, the idea of like decolonization, which is like our 4-part webinar series touches on, I think about how our field school last summer did a great job in intentionally including local researcher in the process of knowledge construction. And especially for a lot of us here, 3 of us and some other friends who were part of the field school and who aspire to be Southeast Asianese, that was an eye-opening experience to, to put ourselves in to consider ourselves as not as hierarchically above others because we come from a Western institution, but acknowledge that our local researchers, they know better about the place that we study better than us, and how we can together go produce the knowledge, and how we as insiders sometimes, outsiders sometimes, enable certain access that insiders wouldn't be able to, and most of the times they were able to get us access, entry to a lot of the communities that we visited that we as outsiders wouldn't be able to. So I thought that the program was really well crafted to make us think about our position as researchers, like what Sara said earlier about, especially in this in our time where academia is becoming more critical. For me, it was coming from someone who growing up not knowing, have no imagination about mainland Southeast Asia. Going to Thailand was my first, and then and eventually Cambodia too. The first time that I stepped on mainland, it was a really great opportunity to learn about other countries outside of East Timor, and also we had an opportunity to learn the language as well and the local culture. And to me, I learned a lot about how, like Kadal said earlier, Southeast Asia is not just ASEAN, this monolithic place, but it can also, it is places are very different. depending on where we go. Even we learn about disparity of urban and rural, how Central Thai is different from the Isan, and how and even as Southeast Asians, we're not automatically insiders. Uh, 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 we're not automatically insiders, but we have this weird position of insider and outsider at the same time. And one experience that I want to reflect on, that I've reflected a little bit last year in our webinar on a reflection on methodologies last year, was how when I went there, I was not considered a foreigner, right? Like the term that they use as a foreigner was subscribed to my other partners, but not me. And so in a way that gave me an opportunity, like this position of an insider, outsider. And I think that my friends who went to Indonesia have a better experience because of the close in the language group, like the Malay Indonesia. But it made me think a lot about my positionality as well, as being a first-time researcher who is researching a place outside of my own country, my own comfort zone, and how like doing research is not always it's not as easy as what a lot of scholars in the books that we read about. You just go and you start talking to the natives, but how you have to navigate your way into the community, and how your identity is also, and your positionality also play into that. So that was an eye-opening for me, and it taught me a lot about the research that I'm doing as well. Because, for example, in East Timor, now my research are going to be taking place in field sites that I've never visited before, and how that even though I'm technically an insider, that doesn't make me automatically insider to the sites that I'm going to, and how and it's something that I have to think a lot, because people in the places that I'm going to, they speak a different language. They speak like a local dialect compared to the national language that I speak. So these are the nuances that we don't learn in classrooms, but the field school really opened my eyes to this. With that, I'll pass it to Dal.
Great, thank you, Ariel. Go ahead, Dal.
Yeah, thanks, yeah, for the field school, just like Sarah, I was part of the South Sulawesi team. I joined the field school with an intention like to learn Bahasa Indonesia, in anticipation of my work in Palu, because like I grew up in Brunei and we learned Bahasa Melayu. Almost similar to what Sarah was talking about, Bahasa Upin-Ipin. And I think like saying, but like now that I'm in the fields, and when people ask me, oh, so you speak Bahasa Melayu, so how does it sound? I said, oh, have you watched Upin Ipin before? And they're like, oh yeah, so that's basically how we kind of speak in Brunei. So it's a good way of breaking conversation too, and trying to, like good example to illustrate how Bahasa Melayu may be different in some ways to Bahasa Indonesia. So there's that. And then I also wanted to learn to do research collaboratively, right, with local partners at UNHAS, and then working with folks with multiple cultural and disciplinary backgrounds, what methods work in the field, what does not, and if method does not work, how can we overcome that? And I learned that as we were doing the field school. And growing up, and then before coming to Sulawesi, and I thought, I know that Sulawesi exists as an island right there, and it's right across Borneo. We know of its existence. It's just that I wasn't aware of what's going on there, the culture, the people there, the languages, the food, it wasn't within my consciousness or the things that I've read. So growing up, my preconceived ideas of Indonesia were mainly coming from, popular culture, like what Sarah was talking about, and from the songs like dangdut, movies, documentaries, cinetrons, or like the soap operas. And the Indonesian culture and language that are being represented in these, accessible popular culture are often, Indonesian culture and places are often represented that are also represented through these mediums tend to come from Jakarta or Java. Like when people want to study Bahasa, right? So they will go for this intensive program that would be sent to Wisma Bahasa in Yogyakarta. And then coming to Sulawesi, they're speaking a whole different language there. They have their local dialects, Bahasa Makassar, Bahasa Bugis, like what Sarah was talking about. Other than that, there's the Mikiji, those little, how should I say, those little things that they add at the end of their verb that just confuses everything, at least for me, my experience. I don't know what you're talking about. So when they go really fast, that's when they lost to me. But so that's the thing. It's just that what I know of Indonesia, what I know of Southeast Asia is mostly from this dominant culture from each countries, all of these little, all of these, peripheral islands are not being brought up so much, making myself clear. So for the field school, like I was part of the Sulawesi team, as I mentioned earlier, and I learned through conversations from these people, and their culture is way different than the ones in Java. And they have their own local language, they have their own dialects, and that I've never heard before. And I remember our partners from UNHAS was going after my last name, and they're like, are you sure you don't have Bugis blood running in you? You're sure your ancestors are not, people from this island? I don't know, I'm not aware of it, because of my last name. La means there's a meaning in Bugis, which means a boy or something like that. My last name, right? Laidin, Dalilah. Okay, they're really trying to convince me, maybe you're Buginese, maybe you do that. And then I remember when I was there too, like this auntie, she starts talking to me in Bahasa Bugis, and I said, I don't understand. Like, oh, you look like a Bugis person. Maybe I should give you a Bugis name and city. And I said, this is the good. I mean, if I were to do like this unethical of, doing it silently, participant observation silently, I would have been a good insider, but that's just not ethical. Even when people mistaken me as local, I still feel like an outsider there, because there's a lot that I don't know about the place, about the culture, the traditions, the nuances of living there. And I think the field school have given me, like, we learned a lot in field school that was not taught, in classes, and everything was ad hoc in field school. And you have to think on the spot when something changes. Yeah, it was a meaningful experience for me.
Great, thank you. I think there was a lot of reflection then about, positionality, being an insider and an outsider, and also, the ways by which we think about Southeast Asia broadly, like in the classroom, but then when you go really paying attention to that kind of the local experience, the differences from what we're sort of learning, the contrast of the national experience versus the really local village level experience and things like that as well. So, the last question before we head to Q&A and take any questions or comments from the audience is, if you could just talk a little bit about how things are going now, in terms of what kinds of things your experience now as conducting sort of field research, and what kind of takeaways did you feel like the field school kind of gave you, if at all, like how are you sort of taking away that experience? So I think here it's going to be Dal, Ariel, and then Sarah.
Thanks, Ehito. Now that I'm in the field, I think every day I feel like I need to keep relearning the language here for ease of communication, right? Relearning the language so that I could gain trust and confidence with the community that I'm working with, and relearning the culture and the people, especially when Pemilu is coming up next week. and then, you know, a lot of change is expected, right? So before coming to Palu, so I spent like a couple of weeks in Makassar to sort out some of the administrative issues regarding my research visa and permit, right? So during those times, I was learning the local terms that are different than what I'm used to. Like, for example, chili peppers in Malay, we call it chili or lada. And in Sulawesi, they call it lombok. So when they talk to me like, oh, do you want lombok? Lombok in my head is that island near Java, not the lombok that you would eat and create this spicy sensation. So I'm learning, you know, things that we would have considered mundane like that. But I think it would have gone a long way if we want to, you know, connect with the community, right? Or getting used to listening to the Makassar dialects of using Mikiji. I think some of our local partners are on the Zoom now. I would even like practice with them. Oh, am I using the Mikiji right? And they're like, no, try again. So grasping that. So I was barely touching the surface there, but just when I'm getting used to listening to the local dialects and picking up, you know, the language, I'm in Palu and I have to relearn the Bahasa Indonesia all over again, relearn and try to get used to, you know, hearing the local dialect of using ba before a verb, just so, you know, I want to gain trust. I want to build rapport here. So I'm constantly relearning new languages, new dialects as I say in this, as I do my field work. And another thing that I learned during my field school, I think that I also learned in my field work that I brought from the field school is relearning to reframe your way of questioning. Because sometimes like, okay, yes, I'm coming in with all these theories and concepts at the back of my head. And when I want to talk to the community, I have to reframe it in a way that they could understand. Like, oh, if I'm gonna go to the field and asking, oh, what do you understand by the word resilience, right? Ketangguhan bencana. Those are not part of their discourse. And I tried that before, like, okay, silly me. I could have framed it in, you know, in 100 ways that would even capture, you know, the essence of resilience. And then from there, I see like, okay, I gotta keep reframing and learning, you know, how to construct my questions just so people wouldn't feel like I'm imposing whatever that I have on them. And I remember going to one of the coastal areas that was affected by the tsunami, right? And I learned that, okay, a whole of Palu is a disaster risk zone. It's basically not suitable for residents, but people are still living here, especially on the coastal area where tsunami hit and struck it in 2018. But there's still people there living there, even though they were given like temporary shelters. They were still building, you know, this makeshift homes. And I asked like, oh, why do you decide to just, you know, stay here? Why don't you just stay at your temporary shelters? And to them, they're like, knowing for a fact that, you know, they're prohibited to build homes there. And you're like, okay, their livelihood is on the coast. And until the next disaster happened, they just have to continue making a living, right? And I said, okay, oh, do you have some sort of like strategies if a tsunami happened? Do you know what to do? And you're like, okay, life or death, it's in God's hands. So in a way there, I don't know what's the English term for it. Like the Malay term would be like pasrah, like, okay, whatever happens, right? So here, like I'm seeing, okay, one way I'm putting my researcher hat and trying to asking people these questions. And the other hand, like I'm just not a researcher, like I'm just trying to I'm seeing people trying to make a living here. And navigating from the non-researcher hat to a research hat has been, I think, hard because I'm also listening to stories about, you know, I'm kind of like forcing them to relive the trauma about what happened then and the people that they lost then. So navigating through that, it's been a challenge here. I'm hoping to do better after this. Yeah, thanks. Next,
Thanks, Kadal. I want to pick up something that Dal said about, you know, like trying to wear research hat and then and then like without our research hat. And that's especially relevant for like for me personally, because I'm studying my own country, where a lot of the issues that I'm looking at is also something that is personal. And I want to quote something that Sopiak said in his latest piece on a geographer's place matter, where a lot of the things that we study as a Southeast Asian student studying Southeast Asian countries that we don't just research things for the purpose of intellectual debates, but actually a lot of our research are informed by the socioeconomic and environmental conditions and the place that we live in as well. And in Timor-Leste, we went from like a post-conflict country, and then more than 60% of people depending on agriculture, like a subsistence agriculture, and right now going through rapid economic transitions, and coupled with climate change, like more climate induced disasters and also drought, has cultivated a sense of urgency to look at these places, not through just like, oh, I want to learn about this because I want to contribute to like this intellectual debates, but also how can I have this conversation with my own people as well. And that's at the same time, it has been challenging because all of this, like Kadao said earlier, and I feel that so much, all of these terms that we learn, even like the term decolonization, that is something that is not familiar here. And field school has taught me a lot about probing my questions, like how not to come in to the field asking all of these like fancy questions we would ask in the academic setting, but how we can rephrase our question in a way that people can understand. And I that is something that an exercise that I still have to practice and continue to think about the question, because like for example, when I use the term land grabs, that trigger certain emotions, or people think that like, why are you even bringing this up? And to me, it is interesting. It has been an interesting experience, and understandably so, because a lot of intellectual productions of Timor-Leste studies are generally written by like Australian scholars or other Western countries, and they're written in English, so they're not very accessible to local people. So being like this new, aspiring to be a researcher in this new country, we don't have a lot of resources or connections, because there are only few people who are doing like a similar work. And at the same time, when I came here, I realized that a lot of Timorese young people who went abroad through like development scholarships or government scholarship, they went to like pursue field studies that are more like oriented towards development, so that the idea that they can come back and develop the country. So we don't have a lot of writings and like a scholarship on Timor-Leste, and that's something that I think a lot about, how like being like a Timorese doing researching, like doing a field study in my own country, and trying to have all of these conversations and enter into these conversations, and using all of these big words, and that people and organizations that I work with don't necessarily like agree with me or understand me, and it has been an interesting experience. That but I'm still in the beginning phase of my research, so I'm hoping to find out more. Maybe I'll have better answers than I am now by the end of this year. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll
Thank you,
keep
Ariel.
mine.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks. I'll keep mine brief. I think I had two things to add. Firstly, I remember I also took a class with Professor Andaya on Southeast Asia now, and I remember she kept like emphasizing the importance of like learning to be Southeast Asianist as opposed to like just a specialist in a particular in our own country, which I think was also like Krishna and the field school's goals. And so I think I understood what she meant then, but now having been through like multiple fields in a sense, and having engaged with local scholars and immersed briefly in Sulawesi and at home, I definitely kind of see the benefits of like having more broader comparative, regional and collaborative perspectives, especially since a lot of the topics that we engage with are so like multifaceted and intersectional. And then to kind of steal Dal's like opening words, I think what I learned from being in the field now and every day, right, it's a reminder that like Southeast Asia consists of like real people facing like real challenges with like real joys, real happiness, and I think a lot of knowledge that we can learn from and we can amplify and we can like exchange with what we have learned as well. And that's definitely something that I think I'm just echoing what Dalilah and Ariel have already said. And so I think going forward, like it's so important for like our research to be like critical and like driven by local priorities and engaged in like meaningful collaborations with like these people of Southeast Asia, who we also are. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all three of you. I think that whole this last question, everyone is very eloquent and powerful in what you all said. We're right at about 22 minutes to go, and so I'm happy to sort of jump right in to some questions. I believe that Ibu Krishna wanted to ask a question, and so why don't we put her on and invite her.
Hello, everybody. It's so great to see everybody who was so close by just a few months ago, and we were together at the field school. And thank you so much for all your very rich reflection here. I am so gratified for something that we actually never planned as part of the field school, which is embedding Southeast Asianists such as yourself in different settings. That was not part of the plan. And just to be honest, which also means that when we were doing the selection, because we had to select who were the students who could join the field school, and you didn't get the placement, the selection because of your origin, but it was because of your interest and also the merit as being a graduate student. So what you told us now is it's been really amazing, because I see how you actually were privileged in some ways to be an insider and outsider, just like all the three of you were mentioning. That you went there, you thought that you are an outsider, but as Ariel mentioned, you were accepted more as a close neighbor. And for Sara and Dal was treated to be, this is very interesting collaborator, very interesting researchers, and yet not that far away from their common knowledge, sort of like just having that position was extremely privileged that not many of us actually have. Just speaking for myself, I am Indonesian, and I learned the same way that you did about learning Southeast Asia in a Western institution. But then I went back, just like what Sara did. I've never really had the privilege of learning or researching in a different country. So that's just a comment about how much contribution that you actually were putting here. And but I have a question that now that you have relearned Southeast Asia and you felt what you learned before has some flaw, especially when you're learning it in the undergrad or in high school. As future educators yourself, how would you suggest that Southeast Asia being introduced to the curriculum? Like, do you have sort of, do you have any recommendations?
Organize more field school, financially supported by different foundations. We would like that because I think putting theory, what we learned in class and in methods class and in Southeast Asian classes too, right? Putting those theories on the ground, making more grounded, I think it's more enriching and it's more meaningful. And I think that's part of the process of relearning. I don't think I have relearned in past tense. I think I am still relearning and still in the process of relearning Southeast Asia and Indonesia in particular, because there's still a lot that I don't know about this place.
What Dal said. But I think also some of the experiences that like I've benefited the most from is kind of like in your class, because now when you brought like Bakarno and Banorhari to like be our colleagues in class, like you know the things that they shared with us like from the ground while we're like so far away in like Hawaii was very beneficial. And I think because there's so much like knowledge out there that's not just in the form of like, you know, an article written by like Benedict Anderson or like Professor Andaya, or like there's like videos that are in like the voices of like local people, or other forms of like more like new kinds of content that I think would be able to like give us a more like varied and diverse perspective on like learning Southeast Asia from the perspective of different voices.
When Kadal mentioned the field school, it reminds me about how, like just like in Timor-Leste, we might have you know, like challenges with like a resource. There's a lot of lack of resources in universities that it is hard to like think about organizing like especially like to a different country, because I like a little experience that I had last year when I was organizing an AAS conference in Boston, for example, and we tried to bring like a faculty members who were at the National University in East Timor, and there were no like funding opportunities. And we, like Bu Krishna said, in Hawaii, we like even going to field school, we're very blessed and privileged with a lot of opportunities. So like resource disparity is definitely a big challenge. And if I were to be an educator, that's something that I will work towards, like bringing in more like funding that you know, like supported students, student activities, and yeah, like initiatives such as field schools that don't necessarily available at the local universities. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Krishna,
you.
do you have any thoughts on well, you know, we're gonna have another panel on reteaching Southeast Asia as well. But I don't know if you had thoughts, Krishna, on that.
No, I think that's a great feedback. I wish we could do more field work. It was a very resource labor intensive. It's labor of love, basically, not just from the organizers, but also from you guys. Completely committed for at least 3 weeks. In Ariel's case, it's 6 weeks. And that's a lot. And I saluted all of you to really carried it all the way to the end. But as I mentioned, I'm just gratified about that, about how this was actually yielding into some more intangible outcome, because it's not just about finding facts of the region that we study. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you for
Great,
all
thank you.
Hi, Krista. We miss you.
Thank you,
Um,
Bukit.
we do have another question. This is from Ming Li Young, and she asks, also kind of as future educators, possibly based in Southeast Asia. Oh wait, this is a very similar question to Krishna's. How will you bring your experiences with you into designing curriculum about Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian students? What sort of resources and opportunities do you think should be provided for higher education institutions in Southeast Asia to increase the educational and intellectual parity in relation to Western institutions? So this is a little bit similar to Ibu Krishna's question, but do you have anything you want to add there?
Honestly, Mingli and I did not discuss this ahead of time, but we think alike.
Great minds think alike. I mean, what I heard from the three of you really was this reflection about also the opportunities and resources being available, and something like this was, you know, only possible because of the Luce Foundation and the particular grant that we were a part of. But there are ways in which, you know, with it, you know, also possibly collaboration between institutions in Southeast Asia, where scholars and graduate students can sort of be working together. That was also a really interesting dimension of this. And so those kinds of things might also be useful. There's a few other questions. Do any of you have any additional comments on that education question? Let me go then to another question. So this is a set of three, so you can kind of take them as you want. But how does the field school aid your field research? Does field school influence the way you perform your own field research? And are you interested in conducting research that compares your home country with the other Southeast Asian countries? If so, what kind of comparison topic would you like to investigate? Why do you find it interesting? So anyone interested in taking that one? I think, again, I think all of you talked a little bit about, you know, the field school and its impact on how you're thinking about research. But this question of like comparison, you know, as a comparativist, I'm sort of interested in how you guys think about your own research and how it relates to other places in the region.
I guess I could talk a little bit, and then hopefully that can trigger more conversation. But I think to me, field school definitely aid in my own research. I spoke a lot last year about how you know, like how I need to it was important to rewrite my questions all the time. I came to the field having all of these questions ready, and then when we were in the field school, and then realized I have to change all of the questions by the end of the field work, because people just wouldn't understand what I was talking about. And that was something that when I'm writing my own questions for my own research, I'm writing the question in the same way that I've learned when I was in the field school. And the field school also like enable establish connections among ourselves and the local institutions that we wouldn't be able to get if we didn't go to the field school. such as like in my case, with the faculty members and partners at the Khon Kaen University in Thailand, and you know, we talk to each other before we laugh about how they want me to go back in the future if I want to continue study about the water infrastructure in Isan, and that's something that I highly consider to do after my doctorate, and I'm very thankful for the connections that we had, and would love to do more research in Thailand in the future.
I think I can add a little bit for question 3. I think given that the nature of my research focus involves like indigenous like resistance to a certain extent, and also like adaptation to like disasters and like climate adaptation and things like that, I think comparative or collaborative as well kinds of research would enable like finding like wider solidarity networks with like researchers and communities from other Southeast Asian nations, which of course a lot of the communities already have, but I think they could be enriched further in a more like intentional way via collaborations like within academia and also within communities, and especially kind of given the pressing issues of like the impacts of climate change throughout like Southeast Asia. I think like some of these do like cut across, and I think would benefit a lot from more collaboration and like comparative perspectives on that.
Yeah, so for the first question, I think for me personally, the field school has been invaluable because before coming to Palu, I was looking for local partners for my research visa and permit application, right? So for foreign researchers who wants to conduct research in Indonesia, you need to have a local partner and have an MOU with a local partner. And thankfully that field school, we already have an MOU with Universitas Hasanuddin, and being in a field school in person and talking to our local partners like Pak Alves and trying to talk through like, okay, what are the things that I need to do? I think that minimize, the whole miscommunication that might have happened if I were to do it Zoom online. So having that personal interpersonal relationship, talking about the bureaucracies, administrative issues, that was invaluable. And of course, the methods that we learned along the way and the way we discussed the research that we want before we go to the site, trying to cater it or trying to tailor it towards the interests of our local partners too. It's one way of learning, right? One of the things that I learned in a field school, and that yields, collaborative research and having these conversations about methods and the framework. So having a back and forth conversation with our local partner, I think that's another thing that I learned from the field school, and I'm trying to bring it to my own field research as well.
Great, thank you. We only have about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to read the 2 remaining questions that are available, and then you can sort of just answer the way that you'd like to draw on the questions. But I want to include both of them because I think they're both really interesting. First one is from Trung Nguyen, and asks, how do you collaborate across the humanities and social science fields to answer your research projects on Southeast Asia? Do you have any advice speaking from your experience? I'm asking as someone who is a PhD student in an institution that does not have a lot of institutional support for Southeast Asian studies. So that's the first one. And then Ben Mosley is asking a question. In Southeast Asian studies, we often still talk about mainland and maritime or island Southeast Asia. Given that Sara grew up in Penang and works with Orang Asli in Peninsular Malaysia, and Ariel has now spent time in Thailand, do you think that this subdivision remains relevant? Has ASEAN superseded any feelings of distinction between these two subregions? Should programs like field schools take such a distinction into consideration when accepting participants? So either or both of those, you guys can answer, and this will be our kind of last round before we wrap up.
I can go. Hi, Ben. With regards to your question, I think all of us kind of did mention that earlier, that our knowledge of Southeast Asia, other Southeast Asian countries, is kind of still, I don't know if limited is the right word, but like we are more familiar with like Southeast Asian nations that are our neighbors. And I think all of us can be categorized as like part of maritime or island Southeast Asia. And I think Ariel also mentioned earlier that, like, you know, our knowledge of like mainland Southeast Asia is still growing, as is our knowledge of like island Southeast Asia. And so I think the idea that Krishna and like field school had to kind of have us kind of go to places that are not or like Ariel to go to like Thailand as opposed to come to like Indonesia that he's like really familiar with, has definitely I think Ariel definitely benefited a lot from it, not to speak on behalf of Ariel. And even in terms of like, you know, Malaysia and like Brunei going to like Indonesia, like we also benefited from that. And so I would say that, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I would say that because we have like learned, the way we learn about Southeast Asia is like a lot of times like at the forefront is like Southeast Asia is like our country, like what we know about our own countries. I would say that it's still definitely useful to, yeah, for us to have like learned the way that we did through field school.
Ariel?
Let's see, I'll try to answer the question from Trung. And I'll probably like do 1 minute and so that I'll have time as well. But I think in our experience, so like our context is very different because we're studying like a agrarian change in Southeast Asia, in the context of, you know, like the rural changes in the rural Southeast Asia. And in our team, we have people from, you know, like we have geographers, we have me from the political science, we have a faculty member who's an engineer, we have our partners are from the agriculture department. And I think it was very helpful to have everybody from completely different field, and then I guess social science are sort of similar, to come together to study about the agrarian change, because everyone brings very unique insight, like scientific insight, you know, like technical insights, and then we bring a social science. So like collaboration across like fields is very it generates a very robust insights on like what we're trying to understand, than just, you know, like yeah. But at the same time, I also want to acknowledge that like a field school, like Book Krishna said, is there's a lot of labor involved, and that's something that has to come from the institution. And I completely sympathize with like lack of institutional support. And Kadal, do you have anything you want to add?
No, it's like just a quick one. What you just said about like how we all from different disciplinary backgrounds, right? And then we came together, and then we did that workshop in Center for Combined Studies in SIMRIP, remember? And I think we were divided into like 3 groups, and then one party was like basically our local partners from Thailand, and we have local partners from Indonesia were on the same table. And I remember like I remember like what they said, that for a collaboration to work effectively, both partners have to communicate what they want. Like, okay, this is what I want, and then Ariel, you should tell me what you want, and then we'll find common grounds there. Because I think throughout the process there's miscommunication as well, right? I mean, that's inevitable. But I think communication is key. It's central to this effective collaboration, especially between humanities and social sciences, which have different theories and different concepts. And I think that's one thing that I can't remember from the field school. Hopefully that answers the question for the first one. And like for Ben's question about the subdivisions, I think in my geographical imagination of Southeast Asia, I don't really think in divisions mainland. I think it was only for the purpose of, you know, of these field school, like, okay, there's mainland Southeast Asia and there's the island Southeast Asia, but on every day, I don't think of it as subdivision. I don't think ASEAN 2 was, you know, superseded the feeling of subdivision between the maritime and the island Southeast Asia and the what is it called? The mainland Southeast Asia. And I think for the field school, I think if programs like the field school, I don't think they should like, you know, filter, they should consider, you know, these subdivisions, because it's just going to perpetuate, you know, bipartisan way of looking at things, and that shouldn't happen, because isn't ASEAN built on consensus? And I think that's what we should be promoting, consensus, and avoid divisions. That's all from me.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to end our session today. Thank you. You know, there are some resources in the chat. You can, first of all, find more information about our future sessions as well. There's also a survey if you're able to fill out that survey. I want to take the opportunity here to thank Sophia Chang at Michigan State University for helping us organize this, and our staff at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies here for running our Zoom all in the background. There's just a lot of work and coordination that goes on. But really, I want to thank Dal, Ariel, and Sara for their really thoughtful insights today. And, you know, I think the field experience was one that was really transformative, and also creating strong bonds. And you could see how well our panelists were sort of interacting with each other and telling their stories and things like that. So it was really nice to see. So that's all the time that we have for today. But thank you everyone for joining today, and we hope that you'll join us for our future sessions as well. So thank you. Bye-bye.